Hello, my name is Eric Lee, and this is my Pecha Kucha on the Jim Crow era, World War One. Before Jim Crow, it wasn't like the South liked African Americans, but after the Civil War, Southerners still held hatred against African Americans because they thought of them as less. This led to organized hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan, which terrorized and dehumanized African Americans across the U.S., mostly in the South. After President Hayes withdrew the troops from the South, the Southerners were free to take any actions against African Americans without Northern interference. And with political power helping the Southerners, they could do whatever they wanted with African Americans in the South. They segregated the powers and utilities of African Americans and oppressed whatever powers they had. 37 years after the Compromise of 1877, Jim Crow laws were still in place, but there was a huge crisis. World War One. Many African Americans and white Americans were fighting to protect their country, but even though they had the same common enemies, they still did not think the same of each other. African Americans were eager to show their patriotism in hopes of being recognized as full citizens. More than 20,000 blacks enlisted in the military, and the numbers increased when the Selective Service Act was enacted, which required all men in the U.S. between the ages of 21 and 30 to register for military service. But it didn't matter how many African Americans there were, or how much patriotism is in their blood, because they were barred from specific squads like Marines or any aviation units. However, they were still able to join the Navy, but they weren't able to do many jobs that required any skill or prestige. So many of them were fighting in the trenches, in the front lines. As a result, there were many all black African Army regiments, like the 369th Regiment, the Harlem Hellfighters. This regiment was made up of African Americans and African Puerto Ricans and was known for being the first black African American expeditionary force. They were part of the army fighting in the western front lines of World War One, but it was not from the command of the US Army. The Hellfighters were sent to France, where the French utilized them to replenish their ranks, allowing them to fight. And this regiment was tough. None of them were ever captured in battle. They never lost ground to anyone. They saw most combat out of every single American regiment, and they were responsible for repelling the German offensive and launching a huge counterattack. But despite their courage, sacrifice, and dedication to their country, they returned home to face racism and segregation from their fellow Americans. But this discrimination did not falter them, because later in World War II, the Harlem Hellfighters returned to action. The Harlem Hellfighters show that diversity is America's advantage in both war and peace. Today, African Americans are able to join any branch of the military, including the Air Force and the Marines. But the Jim Crow mentality is still present, not only against African Americans, but against other races too. The mentality of superiority is still present in many people, like Derek Chauvin. There are also many physical barriers for different races, still, such as the border Donald Trump created between the United States and Mexico. But we are still fighting for the equality of all people today. The mentality of Jim Crow has separated people from each other, and we're fighting to unite everyone as one again. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.